As always, we'll start with a look at global energy commodities, and there's been some recovery at the last day of trading Friday evening yesterday. Brent was up by 0.44%, but still prices down overall. And actually, at one point during the course of the week, Brent did fall below the $70 barrel mark. And of course, WTI well below the $70 barrel mark at $69.23 as at Friday. Up, though, on the last day of trading of the week by 0.38%. Natural gas still very bearish at 1.48% down, and RBOB gasoline recovering as well on Friday by 1.18%. Let's take a look at global equities markets, starting, of course, with Nigeria. Quite a lot of muted activity on the stock exchange in Nigeria in recent times. The all-share index closed the week at 97,456.62 points, over 8,000 deals on the market, and a higher volume or quantum of shares traded than the previous week at 412 as at Friday. And of course, value at 6.46, market cap at 56 trillion naira exactly. Let's take a look at markets around Africa, and it was a positive outlook almost across the board with the exception of Nairobi, but Johannesburg was up by 38 basis points. Ghana in Accra was also up by 0.25%, but Nairobi was down by 0.49% and Casablanca was up by 0.82%. Wall Street is next. Well, good news for Wall Street, because next week, the Fed is taking a rate cut decision. And we know it's going to be a cut because the Fed has been signaling. Markets already responding positively across the board. We're seeing a bit of a rally in tech stocks with new announcements by Google, actually, about its Notebook LM app. I'll be talking about that a bit later in the program. So Dow was up by 67 basis points. The S&P was also up. And of course, NASDAQ Tech tracking 53 basis points up on the market. Let's take a look at my top picks from around the world for the past week. I'm starting here, of course, with Nigeria. This is always great news for local manufacturing because Innoson, local vehicle manufacturer, is unveiling its first locally produced electric vehicle. This is excellent news, given some of the challenges we've had with high fuel prices. And this could really set a precedent for this market for local, not just local assembly of electric vehicles, but local manufacturing of the parts. Innoson says about 70% of its parts are assembled locally, and it imports the rest from places like China. But the company also has a good market in other parts of West Africa, such as Sierra Leone, Ghana, and Mali. So this is good news for Nigerian manufacturers, actually. Innoson being a bit of a trailblazer here. The vehicle hasn't yet been tested, and it still needs approval from the quality control team of Innoson Manufacturing. But this is fantastic news for Nigerian manufacturing and, in fact, the transport sector. EVs around the world, there were about 14 million EVs sold last year. So the market is growing in light of the energy transition. Onto another transportation industry. Boeing's US factory saw for the first time in 16 years workers down tools and workout overpay. This is affecting the production of the 737 MAX as well as the 77 Boeing aircraft. Now, the workers are saying a 25% proposed hike in their wages is not enough and are demanding a 40% hike. The new CEO, Kelly Ottberg, obviously faces quite a tall task early on in her tenure as Boeing's CEO. Of course, the company has been mired in controversy. If you recall, earlier this year in January, there was an investigation after a fuselage panel fell off in mid-flight from an Alaska Airlines Boeing 737 airline. So quite a lot for Boeing in the spotlight. And that workers' strike is really affecting manufacturing of those two critical aircraft for the company. Portugal has launched a new $2.2 billion package to rescue the housing sector in the country. Of course, Portugal is a major tourism destination, and the phenomenon we're seeing is that a lot of homeowners are using houses that could otherwise have been used for long lease as short let for holiday makers. Now, the government is now introducing a new 2.2 billion financing package for people who want to buy their own homes. It's not the only European country going through this crisis. Greece has actually gone through a similar crisis. Spain, the Canary Islands, they're all introducing laws around limiting the growth of short lets. which is impacting houses and the housing sector in those European countries. So rescue package from the government, but not the first that Portugal has given to the sector. Zimbabwe, the Zimbabwe gold, the new currency that was introduced earlier this year, has tanked for the 9th straight week, actually, against the US dollar. This is about the 7th time over the last decade or so that Zimbabwe has tried to introduce a new currency. Now, the value of the currency has suffered against the dollar. The Zimbabwean Reserve Bank has had to pump in around $190 million to shore up this new local currency. So a bit of a jittery start to the introduction of this currency. It's having an impact on business and, of course, private sector operations around the Zimbabwean market, and we'll be following that very closely. Finally, HSBC is in talks to sell its South African unit to First Rand, the largest bank in South Africa by market value. Now, this is a big one because if HSBC manages to sell and complete the sale, it will mark its final exit from the African market to focus on its Asia investment. Of course, HSBC, the Hong Kong and Shanghai Banking Corporation, has divested its banking assets across Africa over the last few years. That deal is still currently, the deal with First Round is still currently under discussions and negotiations, but we'll be following that very closely here on Arise. That's it for my top picks for the past week. Well, that's all we have time for on Business Week for this week. I hope you enjoyed the conversation. I'm Rolake Akinkwefileni, but let's continue the conversation online if you'd like to on X. Do have a lovely rest of the weekend, and I'll see you soon.